Live. All right, hello everyone, and welcome. This is the JEA curriculum hangout for the web curriculum, and I'm curriculum leader Michelle Balmeo, and I'm also advisor of Elistoke at Monte Vista High School in Cupertino. And joining me today are, Paul, do you want to go first?
I'm Paul Candell. I teach beginning journalism, web journalism, and magazine journalism at Palo Alto High School, advisor to Verde Magazine and the Pali Voice.
Melissa?
Hi, I'm Melissa Wantz, and I'm currently a brand new advisor at Harvard Westlake School in Los Angeles. I'm advising the Chronicle and Big Red.
And Justin?
Hi, I'm Justin Reisner. I teach at Carlemont High School. I teach Journalism 2 and 3. I advise online, the newspaper, and we're doing some video as well now.
And Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm Jonathan Rogers. I advise the Little Hawk here in Iowa City. We do a newspaper, a magazine, website, and the Red and White Yearbook.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us today. The purpose of today's panel is to answer a few questions specifically for advisors who maybe are new to advising online publications, who are exploring the idea of potentially advising an online publication, or who maybe just are having a few kinks that they want to hear a few ideas on. So I appreciate you being here, and let's get started. So first off, if you could just start by quickly describing your staff structure. I know for some of you, you've been advising for a while, so that's something that evolved over time, and what roles maybe you have on staff. And a lot of our advisors are coming from a print-specific publication, oftentimes even a monthly publication, so the idea of switching to an online publication, they're trying to wrap their heads around how does the model shift when it comes to publishing online. Who'd like to start?
I can start.
Thanks.
So one thing when I was starting out that I really changed or had to evolve as I was trying to figure out what different editors were doing and the web was changing. So one of my mentors said, well, have you told them, what you expect them to do? And I'm like, well, no. So in our staff manual, I wrote, this is what I think each editor should be doing and the responsibilities they are. And then I also had each editor, when they're applying or after they got their editor position, write what they think they should do. And then we have a general staff reporter responsibilities, expectation, and I have each one of them write what they think they should do or their responsibilities are for each issue. And that just clarified a lot of things and made it really open and out there, and we can always talk about it or see if they're meeting their expectations or not. But yeah, that's it. That's kind of how that I've evolved to.
Yeah, Justin.
Yeah, so when we switched over, I didn't really know what I was doing either, and now that we've evolved a little bit, it seems like the one most important thing for me is to have really solid editors of the online component, because with online the turnaround is so quick that there's not these multiple drafts going on. If there's a football game that gets covered, we need to have that up online by the next day, otherwise it's really, really old news. So really training that editor staff that's going to be publishing and overseeing, kind of they're the safety net between the writers and the publication.
Paul?
Well, my print publication comes out every 6 or 7 weeks, and we do that. Then it's been an exercise in just putting it online. But we got tired of that, and I felt like I wasn't having them fulfill their the needs that we had. I mean, really, it's not responsible to just teach them print. So we put them, we do a multimedia edition once a year in December when we don't really have time to do a regular full edition. And that, I think, kind of breathes life into the digital version of their print magazine throughout the year. We don't get many stories up between issues throughout the year. My other staff is it's 30 students, all digital, 24/7, all the time, and they operate on that much more accelerated schedule. I would say that my advice, like for somebody starting out, would be to think about what I heard from Greg Stobie at the Fresno Christian High School, the Feather, a long time ago. When they made the switch, they took a staff of I think 24 at the time, and they said we're going to have one print editor and one digital editor, and they will have equal power, and they will be a team. And that thinking, you just can't have the web kid in the corner. Any solution short of that is a better solution, I think.
And Melissa?
Yeah, I have to agree with Paul on that. Kind of coming from an interesting background because about 7 years ago I started an online-only publication at a school called Foothill Technology High School in Ventura here in California. And so it was started from nothing. So I got to really develop the editor positions in a very, what I now realize is a very lean management system. So we had an editor-in-chief and section editors for each section, and that was it. And it was very flexible, very nimble. The stories could get turned around very quickly because there weren't multiple layers of editing going on. And so because it was online only, it really worked. Since then, this year, I'm at a publication that's been in a print publication that's been in existence for 23 years and is very robust. It's 32 pages, 8 times a year, a staff of 90 kids. But it's very print first. The mentality is print first. So there's much longer lead time, and there's much more management, many more layers of management that just aren't really working for online. So my challenge this year is going to be how do we flip that? How do we become digital first and use the print platform where it works best? Where does the print platform work best in a digital first publication staff? So I think this year my struggle is just sort of making that transition, and I think also I was sort of surprised that the students weren't really that eager to jump into a digital first mentality. They sort of kind of like the print publication coming out every 6 to 8 weeks, and that's what they're accustomed to. So I'll know more next year, but this year I definitely can sympathize with any advisor who's going through, sort of making that transition from a legacy print edition into sort of online first.
Melissa, are all of the stories posted online?
They are. So the way it has worked in the past, because they have had a website for probably 8 years or so, but the workflow is very different. It's for sports, they get pretty much posted online within 24 hours, which is always the rule that we sort of set when we were just doing online at my old school. For print, though, everything's held. It's printed for the most part. Like there's some exceptions, but for the most part, everything's held, printed in the print edition, and then that day released online in one big, gigantic, sort of swarm of stories online, which is not realistic. It's not really the way that you want to do things. So that needs to flip around and have the digital story. My idea would be to have the digital stories go up as they occur, and then pull anything and expand anything that you think is then worthy for print. That needs to be sort of in that print format. So we're going to be looking at how do we make that flip over the next year.
Yeah, I can jump in there on that. Last year we got lucky enough to go into the Washington Post and also Des Moines Register and kind of talked about how they did it. And the 2 tips they kind of gave us were one, get it up there as fast as you can. Don't wait, don't try and if there's something going up, do it right, but get it up there quick and schedule. And the other thing is just video. We just set up a whole new video studio, and they're more video. They're all working on huge video projects and short videos and using video with their online components and their multimedia stories. So I think those are the 2 big things we're kind of working on this year. And also over the last 2 years, it's just kind of been, there used to be kind of a web team and a print team and all these different and now everybody's web. It's just not an option anymore. Everybody's got to publish their stories online, and then also, with the print newspaper as well.
So one thing that I've gotten to in my organization here is everybody, they start off online, and all they can do is start off online until they start developing to being able to write a bigger, deeper feature story. And I separate the beat stories, which are shorter and quick, and they have to be turned around super fast because it's the more newsy stuff. And anything that's deeper, that gets that more timeless story nature to it, that gets into the school newspaper. So really, there's no news in our newspaper anymore. It's a feature paper.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a really natural segue to my next question. I think one of the biggest fears is there's a lot of advisors who, they have a very set, a very controlled deadline schedule when they're coming from a print publication where everybody's kind of in the same place at the same time. And I think one of the biggest and scariest shifts is moving from that to lots of moving pieces, drafts are coming in all the time, and that can feel a little bit overwhelming. And I remember when we first went all in with the website, I had a little bit of anxiety that I wasn't reading everything and seeing everything as thoroughly as I had previously. So I'd be interested to know how your staffs handle rolling deadlines. Several of you mentioned turnaround time. What does that editing process look like? And I know that it's probably something that's second nature to you now, but be as specific as you can, because I know that there are advisors out here who are going, no, tell me exactly how it works. Tell me where do you see the stories, and if so, when and how many edits are they going through? So as clear as you can, how does your staff manage turning around stories regularly for the website and managing rolling deadlines? Anybody want to take this one first?
So I can start on that one. In my school, what we do is we've got a 2-week window for we call them beats, which is what our online deadlines are on. And we've got a grid where we're able to get out 3 stories per day over a 10-day period, and every student does one of those stories. Now, on the day that is due, the student needs to have it done by a certain time, by 3 p.m., and then the editor of that section of that area will go online and make edits that need to be done and approve it if it's ready to be published. So it gets turned around and edited by only one person afterwards, and after it gets published is when I actually get to see it, usually for the first time, but I rely on my editors to give me feedback as to what they had to change or fix, or what was, or if it was a perfect story. I really lean heavily on the editors to be that quality control.
Wow. I see everything pretty much before it's published, and if they don't extend that courtesy to me, then I tell them I will probably stop extending courtesies to them. I think legally they can do it, and I'm inclined to go more towards, I'm inspired by Justin's model, but I do want them to see, and the volume of stuff that I deal with is, it's pretty frightening to think what might happen without if we let up on that. So that's that part. I would add the other thing is that I generally have students. We don't have a grid like that. I have students responsible for basically 1 story a week for the whole semester on my digital publication. And they can substitute all kinds of projects in for that 1 story, but when it comes time for grading, it's like, do you have what you need? And so we just did quarter grades, and they were supposed to have 9 stories. Those stories could have multiple parts of themselves. For instance, if you went to the school board meeting, did you tweet live from the board meeting while you were there? Did we get the story up maybe even before the meeting was over? Those are the kinds of things that I look for. But 9 stories a week, or I'm sorry, 9 stories a quarter is what the standard is.
Yeah, I can kind of jump in. I'm a little similar to Paul. I still go on a monthly system, even though we publish online. So I've kind of stuck with that, but I go 100 points, and I forget who I stole the 100-point grading system from at a JEA convention, but basically they need to publish at least 2,000 words of work, and different assignments have different point values. Like a big feature 700-word story will be worth like 25 points. A short news brief is worth like 10 points. I try and comment and look at most things. I'm not going to lie, I definitely don't get to all of them. They do publish with everything is supposed to be edited by an editor, and part of the editor's grade is the quality of the online news section if they're online news, or the quality of their news section if they're in the print news editor. So editors know that their grade is dependent on the quality. If there's things being published with errors, that will hurt the editor's grade. And then they also, like the online news editor, she's responsible for getting, I don't know, a certain number of stories published in her section each month, whereas the web editors are trying to get at least 5 to 10 stories. The head web editors have to get at least 5 to 10 stories up on the web every week. So basically, and if everybody writes 3 to 5 stories every month and publishes 2,000 words of work, like, that's awesome. I'm doing my Mr. Rogers happy dance, and everything usually gets pretty done, and that's kind of the system we work. And then I do individual meetings with each one of them, because I found just talking to them broadly is very not effective. And I like having individual meetings after each month, and then we set staff goals and other things like that too.
So I'll jump in and just say I'm probably lean more towards Justin's model. So I'm going to talk mostly about the program that I grew over 7 years at Foothill. And that was, at the beginning, I have to admit, when I first started out, I didn't know whether I could trust the kids to put up the stories and have them be, highly accurate, or what were they going to do. So I was much more controlled and sort of reading every single thing that went up before it went up. And then over time, as I grew to trust the editor's news judgment, and I really do rely, or I taught the NSPA ethics role model a lot. Like, that was one of the things we always hit really hard at the beginning for all the new journalists. And as I grew confident in the editors, it just became easier to let that workflow go through them only. And so by the time that I left that school last year, I would say 90% of all the articles that were put up online were only student edited. I didn't see, I saw after the fact. Did mistakes get through? Yeah, but we had a pretty good correction policy. We were very transparent with that. And never once in the 7 years that they published did anything get up there that was what I would consider irresponsible. The only things that we might have regretted were innocent mistakes, basically, that new journalists would make, and they learned from those. So that was really great, and I want to go back to that model eventually. Right now, I'm reading everything, sort of inherited a system where the advisor goes over everything with a very fine-tooth comb. But I would like to get back to empowering the students to make their own decisions. So
I would say I generally make few changes on a story, few requests on a story that is easy and clean, a sports story, just a simple news story. And over the course of the year, I'll just definitely not be involved as much. But it's the beginning of the year, so I feel like I'm setting tone still.
And just to be clear, it's not that I just tell them, go ahead and write your story and you get no support from me. A lot of times they're writing their stories in class, and they'll ask me for advice as how do I structure this, or who do I need to talk to. And a few times I told them, you know what, you're not telling the whole story. This is what you should do. And so I've seen major revisions based on that. But when push comes to shove, I'm not the last person to see it before it gets published.
And I should add here that we're kind of in between. there are some stories that I will explicitly request I'd like to see that story before it goes up. Yes, by law, they can put it up without me looking at it, but like Paul said, there are certain courtesies that are kind to your advisor, and they, repay in many ways. So there's a lot of content, though, that I don't see until it's up, and we do a lot of critique after the fact, which some people maybe would be a little bit uncomfortable with because it's work that's out there that we're now saying, oh, we should have done this or should have done that. But I find that, a story for us will typically go through a section edit and 3 copy edits, and then a final proofread by the section editor before it's put up. So a lot of eyes are seeing it, and like Melissa said, I've just kind of grown comfortable over the years with I'm not going to see every game review before the game review's posted. And if I did, I feel like I would be the funnel that slows down their process just because I don't think I could keep up with them. But it's true that sometimes things slip through that you go, oh, maybe I would have advised a little bit differently on that, and that's a conversation, and sometimes it's a correction, which isn't the happiest of things to do, but it's also a learning experience. So I want to jump to, I think we'll maybe tackle one more big topic before final thoughts, and that is how your staff handles those very online specific challenges, things like corrections, takedown requests. I don't know if you've gotten any of those, but we have, and we've had to sort of process through them. And I think this is really more of the excuse me, the ethical side of things and the how those discussions happen. So what are some of the challenges that you've maybe encountered that are unique to online publishing, and how have you guided your staff through handling those?
I have 3 good stories. I'll go real quick. One, we had a tweet that this kid from across town tweeted, and that he had been known as this guy doing all this really good stuff, and then he said nasty stuff about City High. And so our students obviously really wanted to expose them, but the kid took the tweet down, so we called press law, and they're like, yeah, if you have it, he published it, even though he deleted it, you could still run it. So they ran it. The other one was a legal issue of a guy who's going through legal issues, and then the case was resolved, and then he wanted the original legal issue as the trial was going on. It was spousal abuse, taken down. We updated it and decided, since he was not convicted, that they took it down. And then the last one was injuries in sports. A kid got knocked out, like, in practice, and they ran a story about people talking about him getting knocked out and all this stuff, and the athletic director wanted it, that we didn't have the medical report, or they can't run that, and blah, blah, blah. And so they did a correction with the wording of, the exact injury. So I'd say injuries, legal issues, and stuff like that were the red flags.
So we had one incident come up where we published a story about this kid who was arrested for having his pants down in a car. He's a former graduate. I got called into the principal's office to ask why they chose to report on that, and I was very easily able to point out the ethical decision-making, that it was newsworthy, this is a local thing, and I think if you can come at any situation from an ethical background, that it was something that was well thought of, then you really have more foundation to stand on. We really have never been asked to take anything down yet, so knock wood, we're okay there. So I haven't had anything beyond just the occasional calls into the principal's office asking, what were you guys thinking? But I've always been able to defend myself.
So I'll go next. We've had a few takedown requests over the years at the Foothill Dragon Press. One of them was from a story, a little profile that we ran during the Occupy movement that was going on, 5 years ago or so. And the Occupy movement came to town, and we had a bunch of reporters covering it. We did little profiles with a picture of some of the people who were protesting. And there was a young man there that was interviewed and gave his name and everything. And then a couple years later, I got an email from him, and he was very upset because he had been trying to get work, and now he felt like this, when you Googled his name, this article came up to the very top, this little high school newspaper, and he was not connected to our school in any way. He was just somebody who had been protesting in our city. And so I always brought any kind of takedown question to the editors, and we discussed it. And the editors discussed it, and they felt like, yeah, we have 3 other profiles that represented other people. They're part of the package. We'll leave those up, but we'll take this guy's down. So they ended up taking that down for him. And the other one was, a couple times I've had former staffers who have written very sort of opinionated columns, personal columns. And later on now they're trying to get internships or trying to get jobs, and they regret, what they wrote in high school. And so brought that to the editors, and in both cases they decided to take down the columns that the former staffers wanted taken down. So I think it's high school, and we're sort of probably a little more lenient and flexible than maybe the professional media would be.
Yeah, we make a pretty strong effort to say that we're not into changing history, as that's the corporate line, but we will take requests on a case-by-case basis. So we have a lot of the same kinds of things that Melissa just mentioned. 4 years after graduation, they've just finished college, they're looking for jobs, and they're horrified at what their record is online. Sometimes the students, the editors will honor it. It's kind of odd to have editors 4 years later making decisions about what the editors 4 years earlier had decided on, but that's all we have, so that's what we use. Sometimes there's some in-between possibilities there. Sometimes it's really their name that they're objecting to having out there, and we sometimes have said, okay, well, we're going to just use a first initial, or we'll somehow modify your presence so it won't show up in search engines quite the same way. Would I delete it out of our database entirely? I might disable this, have them disable the story. I actually don't know. I've never disabled anything. I might have them do that, but I'd say, you know what, keep it in your system. Of course, if you keep it in your system, then there's some, you convert themes or something, and who knows what's going to happen. You might pop up as enabled somewhere else, so there are risks to doing it that way. We did have one crazy story a year or so ago where a student completely fictionalized from scratch, for no apparent reason, an account about how she met a CEO of a major healthcare organization and accompanied him to the hospital while he got a heart attack, and how she then was offered, well, among other things, healthcare for life. That was pretty embarrassing, and we just took that down completely and quickly when we got a call from that director's press secretary.
Wow, that's dramatic.
Yep.
So we've handled several takedown requests, and like Paul, we deal with them on a case-by-case basis. Though the general trend is we don't, remove history. And it gets really complicated when you have things like videos. You take down an entire video because one person in it wants it taken down, but now you've also taken down, 3 other people, and so it's a little complicated. And I think that there's a feeling of impermanence on the web that people don't necessarily associate with print. There was one that the kids did decide to they didn't actually take it down, but they modified the file, and it was from the archives. So they had digitized previous print issues, and the person made a very compelling case that at the time when she agreed to be featured in this story, there was no website, and there was no way for that to be spread to the entire world, and now it was digitized in there, right there on the web for everyone to see. So she was uncomfortable with that, but yeah, it's complicated, and it is a case-by-case thing, but it's, I think, one of the challenges that's kind of unique to advising the web. Last question, final thoughts. And what I'd really like more than anything is, there are a lot of people out there who maybe are thinking, this sounds like it's going to make my job more complicated or more difficult or get me maybe into more trouble or make it difficult for me to advise my students and might just not be worth it. And obviously each of the four of you believe that it is worth it. So I would love to hear your advice for those advisors who are considering or who are just starting out and feeling like, I don't really know if this is worth it. Who wants to start on that one?
Well, I'll say this. There are no jobs in the world anymore for print-only journalists. No student of yours is ever going to graduate, go to college, and then come out and say, hey, I'm working for a print publication. It's not, maybe there's some exceptions, but that is not what you should be preparing them for. Your job is to help them adapt to the new world and be prepared for that. And the only way that you can do that in the world of journalism is to be digital. It's just not responsible to confine them into a print-only space.
Yeah, I totally agree with Paul. I think that it is our job as 21st century skills, journalist skills, digital. It's not the future, it's now. One thing I will say too is at the beginning they're like, oh, this is more work. Yes, it is more work. You can't get around that. But it's worth it. And these are skills that now that I can show them former students that are developing apps and, doing digital journalism for college football stuff and working for all these cool places. And that's where you want to be. The cool, great things that are going on right now is all digital journalism. And I just can't believe anybody, I'm shocked still in Iowa that you would be running a high school journalism program without an online presence. I just don't know why you would do that. But
yeah, I'd like to add on to that. It's not only a journalism skill. This is a life skill. There's so much publishing that happens beyond just if you want to be in a professional news organization. If you're going into a math major or anything, science, the ability to curate and publish your own work online is critical. And everything we teach in here, it's more than just, newspaper stuff. And the more we can do that is reflective of these 21st century skills, I think the better it is for the students. So go for it.
Yeah, and I would just add, I agree completely with what everybody's saying, but two things about workload. I think the online workload is it going to be more in a way, but it's also spread out and it's more even. You're just kind of constantly tending to something every day a little bit. Whereas, if you're printing something every 8 weeks or so, you've got this real downtime, or kids feel a sense of downtime for a long time, and then it sort of ramps up, and then there's just this incredible crunch. I mean, we lay out the paper over a weekend, and it's Friday all night, or all till 9, and then 12 hours on Saturday, 12 hours on Sunday, and it's just kind of ridiculous in terms of what you're getting from that 2,000 copies of a 32-page paper. It's just a lot. The work is very, very different. So the online was actually easier for me than moving into this print situation. And the other thing I would just add is the opportunities that I personally, as a teacher, have gotten by moving to online are incredible. I never would have been able to be involved in the national level with CSPA, or be here right now, or travel, or just be known as somebody with any area of expertise without having an online presence. And I think that applies to my students as well. All the opportunities they've gotten for internships, scholarships, I've had people who've read something and contacted the editor to say, will you please come be an intern for us this summer? We need a good editor. You look like you know how to write. And I can name 5 or 6 of those different examples. But so I would say the opportunities you get from doing online are just far superior to being limited to print.
Wise words. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for sharing your expertise. Thank you for sharing your advice. And I'm sure, hopefully I'm not overstepping here, but if our future viewers are looking to get more specifics, they can reach you. Yeah? Let's get a nod. Yes.
Yeah.
Enthusiastic. Yes.
Totally.
Awesome. All right. Well, we appreciate it, and best of luck for the rest of your school year.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you, Michelle.